Thank you very, very much for being here. I'm going to start. Really excited to see you all today. Let's dive right into our current topic, dialing down the election tension with your teams. And as we all just alluded to, there is a lot going on right now, as you well know. So, who is this program for? This is for folks who are leaders in HR, leadership development, diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging, learning and development and training, and organizational development and culture development. And in the next hour, why should you stick around with us? Well, my promise is that we're going to give you some useful data and information, some actual on the ground facts that might be very helpful to you to see all of what's going on in perspective. Give you a chance to dialogue and learn from each other, provide you with some of what we consider to be our well-considered conclusions on all of this, introduce a couple of tools and techniques that you can use right away, and an opportunity for coaching at the end of the program. Also, there's a link in the chat to my calendar, and if at any time you want to set up a call with me, just click on that link. It'll take you right to my calendar. Very simple and easy. Okay, who the heck am I? Well, I am the founder of the Center for Respectful Leadership, and I'm considered a thought leader and an expert on respect and organizational culture. I've been doing this work for a very long time. I actually started as a trainer for the New York City Police Department a long time ago during the 80s, which makes me really old. And back then I learned that well, I was a smart aleck kid when I was growing up, and when I encountered the police, didn't actually show them very much respect. And what I learned from working with the police department is that being a police officer is very, very tough job, a very tough job. And respect is a very powerful tool in the police officer's toolkit. And I also worked as a correspondent overseas for BBC Radio and a number of other UK media. And I got to cover the fall of the Berlin Wall in 1989, which makes me very old. And actually carry a piece of that wall. And whenever I keynote and talk about change, I bring out that little piece of the wall. And it's not worth very much. I checked it out. It's not big enough, doesn't have enough graffiti on it, but it is priceless to me. I was very fortunate back in 2016 that a little business fable I wrote called The Respectful Leader was picked up by John Wiley and Sons. A complete surprise, did not expect it. And then when it was released, the editors at Amazon named it the best book of the month, and it suddenly became an overnight bestseller. We sold 8,000 copies in the first week. I'm still just pinching myself, can't believe this. And then it won an award in a major business book competition and won the gold medal for best business fable. And I'm kind of proud of that. So I decided to frame it and put it on my wall behind my back so you could all see it. And I'm also an executive coach and a consultant and the developer of a process I call Coaching for Respect. So if you have two employees who have fallen out of respect for each other, it might be possible, if they're willing, to coach them to come back together, at least maybe not to hug and kiss, but certainly to have a productive work relationship. I've been doing this work for a long, long time, and it's my passion, it's my joy, it's what I focus on every single day. Now, who are we? Well, we are the Center for Respectful Leadership. We specialize in delivering keynotes and seminars and L&D programs on respect and respectful leadership. We also help organizations create what we call an actively respectful culture, because there's really, really good value in having a culture where people are actively treating each other and your customers with respect. We also do executive coaching and group coaching on respect. We do a lot of research, and I do a lot of writing and a lot of training on respectful leadership. And we specialize in using live professional theater in our training programs. Even in Zoom, we do that. And we also specialize in doing alternative dispute resolution. Now, who do we serve? Generally speaking, we serve medium to large organizations in industry and government. Our clients include folks like Intel, Booz Allen Hamilton, ADP. We do a lot of work with SHRM conferences and SHRM chapters and statewide SHRM and international SHRM, and also the federal government. And the media coverage of us comes from Forbes. You can see it there, Fast Company, Fortune. So we've been really blessed with a lot of attention. And people seem to care about respect right now. And that we believe that's a really good thing. Okay. So I've been doing this work long enough to know that these behaviors are fairly common in most organizations. Are you seeing in your organization perhaps friction between individuals and groups and generations, for example, often resulting from conscious or unconscious behaviors that others find disrespectful? Are you seeing people stereotyping each other, assuming or assigning negative to stereotypes, or miscommunication? People aren't listening to respond, they're listening just, excuse me, people are listening to respond, not listening to understand. And they're not sharing information and they're operating in silos. They're also having conflicts around personality or behavioral styles or ideologies and belief systems. And there's a lot of silos going on in organizations. And then finally, are people being dismissed as being too sensitive or being dismissed because they're too rude, or people just separating from each other because they won't accept feedback or they're not listening to each other carefully enough. These are very common behaviors. How many of you are experiencing some of these behaviors in your organizations? I'm probably seeing some heads nodding. Yes, yes, and hands going up. They're very, very, very common. So why is this happening? Well, all of our research leads us to the conclusion that we are seeing in society in general the highest levels of public, what we call public disrespect, where people are treating each other badly and disrespectfully and with incivility in the public space and in out in the stores, out on the street, uh, while on public transport, you name it. We're seeing a lot of public disrespect, and evidence seems to be that it is at its height right now, and it hasn't been this bad since the height of the Vietnam War during the late 1960s and early 70s. And back then, of course, we didn't have these things in which we could constantly be looking at and seeing the latest news, and as that woman was in the picture, just going, oh my goodness, and just we're constantly being bombarded with negative information. All of us, every single one of us, everybody who has a phone, which is just about everybody. And then you go home and you turn on the TV, and it's just this constant negativity, this constant incivility, this constant disrespect. Also, what our research is telling us is that the pandemic, it's odd, it's still with us. How many of you have felt like, okay, life was a certain way before the pandemic, and then now life is different, even though we're supposedly kind of back to normal? It's never going to be like it was before the pandemic. How many of you are nodding at that one? Yeah, there's a lot of study that needs to go into this, but essentially the world has changed and is in a new direction since the pandemic. I mean, there were trends happening before the pandemic, but the pandemic really either accelerated those trends or caused a unique shock to the system in which we never really returned to what it was before the pandemic. Other things we're noticing is the VUCA business environment. VUCA stands for volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous. Now, this term was coined by the U.S. Army War College to talk about battlefield conditions: volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous. Well, that makes sense. Well, business leaders glommed onto that phrase, and they would apply it to big incidents or big events that were kind of world shattering in the business world. How many of you remember, and those of you who are in manufacturing, I know you remember this, when the ocean going freighter can't remember the name of it, got caught in the Suez Canal, got wedged sideways, right? Completely blew up global supply chains. It was absolute, caused a huge mess. And how many of you had to cope with that? And so it was like all hands to the pumps. And let's figure out how can we get workarounds. It cost us money. We were delayed. It was just an absolute mess. And they called that a VUCA incident. Well, what's happening now is we are seeing more and more VUCA incidents. Those used to happen maybe once or twice a year. And when you respond to a VUCA incident, you're doing things at a high level of stress. Well, now we're seeing more and more and more VUCA incidents all the time. And so that increases stress exponentially. And the number one driver of disrespect in the workplace is stress. So, quite frankly, look at the pandemic, VUCA incidents, public disrespect. This causes an enormous increase in stress. And there's an old saying, when the going gets tough, the tough get going. How many of you you're all familiar with that saying, right? Well, here at the center, we've kind of modified that saying. Yes, when the going gets tough, the tough get going. And when the going gets tough, people get tough on each other. And so that stress just compounds itself over and over again. How many of you would say your levels of stress are higher now overall than they were before the pandemic? How many of you would say that? I think most people would agree. Uh, ISIS, or ISIS, you're saying no. It- Are you?
No,
Do you
but
have
I
less
think,
stress?
yeah, but I think it's not pandemic based. I just changed places that I worked.
There you
So,
go. There you go. Very good. Yeah. Well, that'll do it, right? And sometimes our work environments get so stressful that we say we can't do this anymore. I'm glad you brought that up. MIT released a study last year that showed that a toxic work environment is 10 times more likely to cause someone to quit than compensation. 10 toxic work environment, 10 times more likely to cause someone to quit than compensation. Isn't that interesting? So, what else is going on in the political world that's contributing to all of our stress? Well, Glassdoor has actually studied this quite a lot. And last November, they came out with some really interesting data. 61% of employees reported having political discussions in the previous 12 months. And this was November of last year. So all of 2023, these folks were reporting having political discussions. Now, here's what's interesting. This surprised me. I did not expect this. What they found, what Glassdoor found, is that an overwhelming majority of workers, 82%, are comfortable working with colleagues who have different political opinions than their own, but they're somewhat less comfortable talking with colleagues about it. Quite frankly, I thought that it would be the other way around, that they would be less comfortable working with people who have different political opinions and even less comfortable talking about it. So, what we're seeing now is a bit of a shift that people are more comfortable talking about politics at work now. Um, but and working with people of different political opinions, which means we're just having very diverse work environments, but not necessarily talking about politics outright. So it's an interesting complexity here. I wanted to point you to the chart because boomers, interestingly enough, 65% of men in the boomer generation are pretty darn comfortable with political discussions at work. And then if you look at women, at only 51%. Gen X seem to be very. Do I have any boomers like me here on the call? Who's a boomer like me? Okay, there's a few of us. Apparently, we're pretty comfortable. The men are pretty comfortable. Women a bit less. On the Gen X category, men are very comfortable talking about it. Again, women a bit less. And in the millennials and Gen Zs, it's about the same. Although millennial and Gen Z women seem to be more comfortable talking about it than boomer women and Gen X women, interestingly. And then finally, in Glassdoor, they have these bowls. I don't know if any of you are members of the Glassdoor bowls. They're discussion groups, really. And what has been coming up a lot in the fall of 2023 and continues is the discussions of the conflict in the Middle East. And then back then, 8% were mentioning Biden and Trump. My assumption is Harris and Trump are being mentioned a heck of a lot more than just 8% in Glassdoor polls. Let me show you a little bit more data. Uh, Glassdoor and CBS did some research on this and found that 50% of workers only feel comfortable sharing their political views with their colleagues when it's anonymous. When it's anonymous. And those who prefer anonymity are skew younger, Black, and Democratic identifying. That's interesting. That's interesting. And among racial groups, Hispanics are more likely to be sensitive to the politics of their senior executives. And uh, there was a poll done in January of this year that indicates that 49% of Americans expects violence in November. And this was before we had 2 assassination attempts. So that's sobering. That is sobering. And 70% of Americans believe democracy is under threat. And what's interesting, both from the left and from the right. So isn't that interesting? So it got very quiet here. And I don't mean to depress you. I just want to give you what's real. Okay, final bit of information. Among all generations, this is where I think it's really important for you who are leaders in HR who have the ear of your leadership team. Uh, among all generations, 55% are comfortable with your company and your CEO taking a political stance in public on the various culture issues. However, if your CEO or company takes a public stance with which they don't agree, they are less likely to apply for a position in your company. Isn't that interesting? And 31% of respondents to the Glassdoor survey said they would consider leaving their current employer if their CEO or company advocated or supported a position with which they did not agree. So I think you know where that's going. That we may want to talk with our leadership about taking public stances on these hot button issues. Interestingly enough, Gen Z is supportive of their company taking a formal stance on political issues, but not a candidate. And 49% in Gen Z said they would not apply for a job if they didn't agree with that public stance, and 44% they'd consider leaving if they didn't agree with it. Interesting. Interesting data among the Gen Z. How many of you have Gen Z employees in your workplaces? Quite a few of you. And millennials. Yeah, I'm sure a lot of you are millennials. Do I have any Gen Zs? Any Gen Zs here? Okay, millennials. Where are my millennials? Do I have millennials here? And Ria, I don't mean to ask you to speak for all millennials. I'm just curious, among your Gen Z and your millennial colleagues, do these numbers seem to make sense to you?
Yes, quite a lot, actually. Just surprising to see the numbers here. And also, though we don't have that kind of stat available here, even if I look within the company, but this is in terms of thought process, in terms of how people take it, it's very similar.
Got it. Thank you. Thank you for that. So I want to share something that the Carnegie Endowment report that came out last year and I take this as good news. I generally try to, even though I'm a New Yorker, I try to stay positive. And what the Carnegie Endowment for International Peace found is that American voters are actually less ideologically polarized than the news media says we are. And there's the misperception that we are deeply politicized and polarized comes mostly from those who are very, very politically engaged. Isn't that interesting? And that there's no question that American politicians are highly ideologically polarized. So the politicians are definitely opposing each other over and over and over, and there's very little overlap. I'm old enough to remember times where you would see cross-party voting both in Congress and the Senate quite regularly. It wasn't and bipartisan legislation. It wasn't that much of an oddity. And today it's almost impossible. And so th- the one key factor is what Carnegie calls emotional polarization. So what happens is when I find out you're a Democrat or you're a Republican or you're an independent, whatever you are, I immediately have an emotional reaction to that, which isn't necessarily rationally or cognitively based on anything. It's just that I am already now emotionally triggered by the very fact that you identify with a certain group. And so it makes it much less possible for me or any of us to engage in a healthy, open dialogue, which is what we hear people always asking for. Let's have a healthy, respectful dialogue about these things. Well, because we're also emotionally triggered at a very base level, we can't do that because we're emotionally polarized. Does that make sense, everybody? So we actually agree cognitively on a lot of the issues. One of the big ones that I always hear all the time is something like 70% of Americans agree on background checks for guns, and yet I mean that's just not happening. So it's an odd kind of so cognitively we agree there should be background checks. Most of us agree, and yet you wouldn't know that by looking at what's happening emotionally. Does that make sense, everybody? So here's how we take all of this data. Here's how we conclude it, and then I'd like to ask for your thoughts and tell us what's going on with you. In general, we find that talking about politics and hot button social or culture issues at work used to be more taboo than it is now. It is more accepted, but tolerance levels vary by generation, by gender, and racial group. In other words, tolerance for those kinds of conversations varies. Gen Z is the most aware, interesting, and that we are emotionally polarized and that could cause emotional reactions and outbursts at work. If you remember, I said our society is so publicly stressed that that stress is bleeding, my choice of words, into the workplace. So this could put psychological safety at risk amongst your teams, amongst coworkers. Imagine I've served utilities. Imagine somebody gets into some kind of ideological fight while they're up on a bucket in the middle of a snowstorm trying to repair power lines, and they start yelling at each other. That's a safety issue. That we're all. I've seen it happen. I've I've had people talk to me about this, that they've had fist fights out in the field about their politics. It's like, oh my goodness. So taking a public stance on cultural and political issues could be problematic for your organization. And indicators are that as our election gets closer, things are going to be more tense and fraught. I'm suspecting that you're all going to, if I ask you this question, which I will in a moment, are you sensing that tension now? I'm suspecting a lot of you are going to raise your hands. And this is very likely to bleed over into your workplace. So I want to ask the question, can you share, if you feel comfortable, what are you seeing? What are you sensing? Is this in line with what you're observing and sensing? Anyone have any thoughts on this?
Well, I'll speak
Yes,
from
sure.
from serving my client's perspective. Yes, from law enforcement officers having a big time argument in their patrol cars because they have different ideologies, to all the workplaces are having these conversations. They're not staying outside, and they sometimes become very fraught. I have another person that I work with, and she was specifically called in to an organization because they were having these political
Uh-huh. Yeah.
ideology changes. So it
Yeah.
is occurring
Got it.
more than we would like to see.
Yeah, I think we all agree more than we would like to see. Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Laponda. Anybody else? Are you seeing this kind of behavior? Is it bleeding over into your workplace? Go ahead, Lori. What are your thoughts?
I'm not seeing open discussions. I think maybe being a more conservative organization
Hmm.
and also a very,
With a lowercase c, you mean?
yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, just in terms of behavior, it's very ingrained in people that these are discussions we generally avoid at work, and they respect that.
Right.
But it plays out in other ways. There was recently a very passive aggressive battle between a couple of individuals. Don't even know who they were, but they were fighting over whether the TV that we have for employees to watch during the lunch break was on CNN or whether it was on Fox News.
Fox. Yep. Yep. That's a
And
classic. That's a
it
classic.
became a very heated battle,
Yep.
where it almost was perceived that it was being done just to annoy
Yeah.
each other
Yeah.
rather than to actually watch the content on either station. So it
Right.
plays out in interesting
Right.
ways.
Yeah. How did they resolve that one?
Well, they wanted me to legislate what stations were allowed on TV, and I would not go there. Um, and so I appealed to people's good behavior and respectful behavior because that's something that we do value here.
Yes. Yeah.
And it seems to have stopped.
Good.
We'll
Good.
see if it lasts.
I had a client that had the same exact issue, and they could not honor treating each other with respect about it. So they said, how about they just decided, leadership said, okay, sports only. That's it. It's just going to be sports. And whatever sport is on at that point in the day, that's what's going to be on the TV, and that's it. So that was their solution. Eh, you know, kind of nobody happy there, unless
Yeah.
you're a sports fanatic.
I'll also
Yeah.
share that I'm anticipating that depending on the outcome of the election, I recall the last election, we had issues because we have TVs in our bank lobbies,
Uh,
and we were showing the inauguration, and it was on the news. And we
right.
had customers that would come in and say, turn that off. And then other customers would engage and say, no, turn it on.
Turn it on.
And our
Yeah.
employees were caught in the middle of the battle of customer opinions. So we want to get out in front of that and anticipate,
Yeah.
how do we handle that so that we can avoid those kinds of issues being problematic in our branches.
And if somehow the TVs all go down on this on inauguration day, then
So be it.
so be it. Technology sometimes fails. Got it. Wow. Wow. Anyone else? Paula, go ahead.
Yeah, for a similar to Lori, the issue is more the
our members is they are the ones who want to engage in that type of talk more than our team
Yeah,
members, and
yeah,
it's very hard to avoid those conversations, and people are angry. They're
yes,
really
yeah,
passionate.
yeah. They're really passionate about it, and your employees are trying your utmost to be neutral and
Yeah,
let's focus on what we're doing here, that kind of
yeah.
thing, and it probably makes your employees very uncomfortable too.
It does. It's
Yeah,
like, can we
it
just
does.
get this transaction going? We don't need to discuss this, but yeah.
Yeah, got it. Uh, Sean, I've been watching your face, and correct me if I'm wrong. Something's going on in your head. Tell me what's
Yeah,
going on. Yeah,
yeah, Greg. I just feel like there's an elephant in the room here, and
yeah,
I'm just gonna be blunt because that's the kind of guy I am. We all know that every time Trump opens his mouth, he's lying through his teeth. Haitians eating dogs, cats. Come on, really? Not to mention anybody who supports the overthrow of the government should never be in the White House, Greg. And I'm sorry, but anybody who thinks otherwise ought to have their head examined. That's just how I feel.
got it. Well, Sean, I can tell you feel pretty passionately about this. Is that fair?
I do, and so do my team members. I hate to say
Yeah,
I agree with a lot of them.
understood, understood. And well, I think we can agree that this is a pretty this is an unusual election to say the least, right? I mean, this is unprecedented. As I mean, we hear that word a lot. We we hear that there's a lot of surprises going on. That, as you said, people are saying things that are just uh, very hard to believe, and they're doing so. So I think we can agree this is a pretty loaded situation right now. Fair enough.
Fair enough.
Yeah. Yeah. And I also think that we can agree that as leaders in our organizations, we do have a responsibility to set the tone, correct?
Sure.
And certainly you as a director of HR, you feel that responsibility. True?
I do. It's just a challenge when you when you agree with what people are saying. I don't know what to say.
Yeah. Well, what would happen if someone in your organization totally blew up and said the exact opposite of what you just said? What would happen?
Well, probably a pretty big conflict, Greg.
Yeah. So, and again, as a leader, that's probably not what you want. I'm assuming you don't
No,
want that conflict. Yeah,
not
yeah.
at all. Not at all.
So at the end of the day, uh, thank you. I understand your passion. I get you. And I know a lot of people feel passionate. And I just think we can agree we need to find a way together to cool things down and not let that passion impact each other so negatively that it causes an uproar in our organization. Fair enough?
Fair enough. Fair enough.
All right. So, what I would like to do now is take a time out and introduce to you all this gentleman here who's playing the role of Sean Davidson is actually Darren Glesser. He is our senior vice president here at the Center for Respectful Leader. He is also a professional actor. And one of his biggest claims to fame is Beach Blanket Babylon.
Yes, sir.
How many years did you do that show? How many of you know that show? Great show, fun show. How many years, Darren,
About
did you
three
do that
years.
show?
About three
Three
years.
years. Playing how many different characters?
Oh, I don't know, 50, 60, some of which were many politicians. You name it.
And you do a great Trump. I've seen you do a great Trump. So it's huge. What you do is huge.
Very huge. Yes.
So So what we wanted to do, everyone, is introduce what we call a purple cow. In the middle of a very deep, thoughtful discussion, I just wanted to introduce that emotional element to, did you notice how everybody got very still on the call? You all got very still, and you're thinking, oh boy, what's Greg going to say? And what I did is I used some very simple techniques that you can use as well. The first thing I did was I acknowledged his passion. You probably heard me say, "Wow, Sean, I think you seem very passionate about that. Is that true?" And of course, that's kind of obvious. Now, I didn't agree with his position. I simply stated that I could tell he was very passionate. Now, the reason I do that is psychologically, when I acknowledge someone's emotions and I use language to describe the emotion that they are eliciting in that moment, their neocortex, the thinking part of their brain, kicks in. Right now, they're operating from their amygdala, their emotional center. But when you start using language to describe their emotions to them in a way that just acknowledges that they're emotional, they will start thinking about it more rationally, and that's what you want. The idea here is not to either agree or disagree, and not to just slam him and say, you will not say that in this organization, because that's just going to blow things up. Instead, acknowledge the passion without agreeing or disagreeing. The next thing I did was I used my favorite phrase in conflict resolution. It's called, I think we can all agree. And all I did was say, I think we can all agree that this is complicated. It's loaded. It's complex. And by the way, you can say that about anything that comes up in the workplace. It doesn't have to be politics. So the I think we can all agree is another. Oh, I have psychologists as friends, and they say, don't say this, Greg, but I'm going to say it anyway. It's a trick. When you use the word, I think we can agree, the person who's all wound up thinks they are being agreed with. But really, what you're saying is we can all agree on something that everybody agrees on, that this election is unprecedented. The level of tension and craziness is off the charts. We all agree on that, regardless of where we stand politically. So this is my favorite phrase. I urge you to use it whenever there's conflict about any situation. Use the phrase, I think we can all agree, and modify it by saying that this is complicated, it's complex, it's loaded. I also use the words, I don't think we can solve this here. I think we'll have to, and I didn't say this, but I'll often say we have to leave it up to history. If it's about politics, we'll have to leave it up to the voters, and so on. And again, these are things that everybody kind of rationally agrees upon. We can't solve it right now. We can't solve this election right now, today. We can't solve the question on abortion right now, today. We can't solve the question on the economy right now, today. I think we can all agree with that. So we'll have to leave it up to the voters. We'll have to leave it up to history, is also one of my favorites, because okay, history is so generic. It's not a hot topic. And then at the end of that little demonstration there, I deflected uh, with Sean. I got him back to talking about what's going on in his workplace and focusing on how he, as a leader, can stand up and create an environment where people feel respected and so on. So essentially, the technique is to acknowledge the passion, state common agreement, what we can all agree on, defer to history or to the voters, and then deflect them back to a work-related topic. This is a technique I've used for many, many years. It actually comes out of Laponda. You'll appreciate this. When I was doing ride-alongs on hostage negotiation, I would see negotiators use these kind of techniques. It was brilliant. It was absolutely brilliant. And when I get a chance, Lapana, I want to tell you a story about Grace, who I worked with, New York City Police Department hostage negotiation team. Fascinating woman who used all of these techniques like nobody's business. And then, but I want to make a point here. Those of you who are heads of HR, what you don't want to do is leave this thing alone after you de-escalate it and the topic goes back to whatever the work related topic is. You need to nip it in the bud offline. You need to have the follow-up conversation with the individual. And essentially, we use a technique developed by the Center for Creative Leadership way back in the 1970s. It's called SBIR. in which you bring up the situation. Hey, Sean, remember that meeting we were having this morning? Paula was there, Patty was there, Lori was there, and you started talking about the election and Trump, and you were pretty angry, and you were making some pretty forceful comments. You remember that, Sean? And of course, he's going to say, yeah, I remember that. And then you want to go into the impact. And this is the most important part of the SBIR technique is impact. Well, Sean, what that does is it spins everybody up in the organization. It gets everybody hot under the collar. And it also makes it look like you're intolerant. You're just voicing really, really strong opinions in a way that could be perceived as you just having no tolerance, no acceptance of differences. And I know you're better than that. That's not who you are. And then you can make the request. Sean, in the future, what I hope you'll do is if you feel the need to let loose with your political opinions, take a deep breath. Take a second. Think about how that might impact the rest of the team. And if you want to go talk politics, okay, maybe that's something you can do on your own time, out of work, maybe with your buddies. But I think you can see how damaging that can be in this workplace. 9 times out of 10, everyone, if you use the SBIR technique on someone who is a reasonable human being, they will acknowledge what happened. And they might even say, oh, Greg, you're right. I need to make an apology. And then you talk with them about how to make what we call a full apology if they're going to do that. But at the end of the day, you want to de-escalate the tension in the moment using these techniques on the left-hand side of the slideshow. And then you want to nip it in the bud privately offline so that it doesn't happen again. Questions, thoughts, ideas about this? Is this familiar? How many of you are familiar with these techniques? LaPonda? Yep. Yep. Very good.
And one
Yeah.
of the things too, Greg, is that that left side, it doesn't embarrass him in the moment.
Right.
It actually acknowledges his agency to believe that, right? But it doesn't embarrass him. And then you take him or her back on the second side.
Yes.
And them come up with, oops, yeah, that was probably
Yeah,
pretty
that's
bad.
often what you'll get. They're like, oops, oh, I didn't think about it that way. Oh my goodness. Right. Yeah,
Or I
but
just had a conversation about this and I was already wound up. But
yes.
keeping them with that
Yeah.
agency and respect in front of their peers, and then them
Yes.
going back to their peers, it really they respect you more as a person
Yes.
has to be in front of them. But second of
Yes.
all, they're going to start respecting themselves and their peers more because they get to
Thank you.
put a mirror in front of them. So
Yeah.
yeah, it
Thank
does
you.
work. It does work.
It does. Thank you. Anyone else? All right. Our time is a little bit short. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to introduce something we call upstanders. How many of you have heard of upstanders? We don't want our folks who are in leadership roles or who are respected for being respectful. We don't want them to be bystanders. We want them to be upstanders. We call them champions of respect. So it behooves you as an organization identify the folks in leadership or in highly visible roles who are respected by most people in the organization and take them aside and say to them, would you be willing to be an upstander? And all you'll have to do, if someone brings up a difficult topic, someone pops off and says something passionate that is getting people stirred up, maybe you train them to say, okay, folks, hey, hold on, let's dial it down. If people are attacking each other, hey, come on now, we don't talk that way to each other here. And this kind of talk only spins people up. And of course, they could use the other techniques that I was talking about earlier. The I think we can agree, and I can tell you're passionate. And what we also want is for people to feel comfortable backing up the upstanders. So a person who is a bystander could say, that's right. Laponda's right. We don't talk that way here. Hey, Laponda is right. Let's dial it down, everyone. Hey, we need to take our conflicts offline. Now, if the person is so passionate, I've had this happen. They just push back. They say, well, I just happened the other day. I'm not politically correct. I speak my mind. And then I'll say, well, I get it. I get that you're passionate. I get that you speak your mind. And you'll recall at this company, we've talked about this before and how important it is that we hold each other to the highest expectations of treating each other with respect. And I'm sure you're aware of how this could negatively impact others on this team. And then, is there anything else that any of you are doing or saying that seems to be working for you? I'm curious. Any other techniques? The one thing I have seen, which I only advocate if the situation has gotten so tense that everyone's in, the fight, flight, freeze mode, the amygdala hijack. Everyone is so tense. People are either totally frozen and their eyes are like this, or people are like kind of their bodies are moving back. The only other thing that I've seen that's worked is one of the champions or someone who has high visibility who's respected literally goes right up to the person who has said the language and say, "Hey, follow me. I need to talk to you." And literally, in the police department, we used to call contain, control, and remove. And so they would go right up to them in the face and say, "I need to talk with you over here," and literally remove them without grabbing them, but by dint of their presence, get them out of the space. Now, only do that if things have reached a critical mass where you can tell this is really, really bad and it could get even worse. Like you're at the point of people starting to square off and that kind of stuff. Anybody ever have seen it to get that bad? Yeah, yeah. So, and lastly, I want to talk about what we call an actively respectful culture. I mentioned this before. Essentially, it's where an organization like yours makes a choice at the highest levels that we are going to operate not only by the golden rule, do unto others as you would have them do unto you, but also by the platinum rule, do unto others as they would have you do unto them. And the only way you can operate using the platinum rule is by having your emotional intelligence switch turned on. And that is essentially what an actively respectful culture is. People are aware of how they treat each other with respect, and they go out of their way to actively, consciously operate using the platinum rule. And there's ways to develop culture, actively respectful cultures. We actually have an assessment called the ARC assessment that you could um, assess your culture along different axes of respect. There are different areas and behaviors of respect, and we can give you a comprehensive report. So I want to give you some quick data that's going to make you all smile because right now you're all very serious and I get it. So employees who feel that their leaders treat them with respect, and that includes having an actively respectful culture, are 63% more satisfied with their jobs, 55% more engaged, 58% more focused on their work, and 100% more likely to stick around. We love that. And one other piece of data is, did you know that respect, health benefits, and work life are the top motivators right now in today's workplace for all employees? Money, salary is not the top motivator. It's respect, health benefits, and work life balance. And among people of color, respect is the top motivator. Top motivator. And among whites, it's still very high. Among women, it's very high. And among men, it's still very high. Our point is you can't go wrong with respect. Respect is really, really effective. And so here's what happens when you create an actively respectful culture, a lot more collaboration between individuals and groups who are genuinely willing to help each other out. Perspectives are valued, even if they're opposite perspectives. People consider each other's points of view. There's better communication. People are listening to understand rather than just listening to respond, and they're sharing information more. And the conflicts are reduced. People are adapting to each other's behavioral styles. They get stuff done faster and better. And there's an increase overall in respect, again, through using the platinum rule. So today I promised you to give you some useful data and information. Did I honor that commitment? And I promised to have you allow you to have a chance to dialogue with each other. Did I honor that commitment? Great. And did I come to helpful conclusions? Were these helpful to you? And finally, did I give you tools and techniques that you could use? Terrific. I'm seeing thumbs up. Thank you so much. And now I want to give you a quick opportunity for coaching. You have a choice. You could take these concepts, you could take these conclusions and these tools and techniques, and you could go forth and make them work. And that's great. And if you genuinely feel it would be helpful to have my perspective, an outside perspective, then all you need to do is get your camera out and mouse over that QR code, and that'll take you to my Calendly link, which is also in the chat. And you select a day and time to meet with me, answer a few questions about your organization. I will sell you nothing on this call. Even if you wanted to get out your credit card and pay me, I will not accept it. We'll set up another call after that if you want to continue to get my help. I just want to be of help to you. This is what I love to do. I cannot thank you enough for being with us today. We hope this has been helpful. We've got a few minutes if anyone has any questions or comments. We are officially done, and I'm happy to open the floor to discussion. Thank you all very much for being here. You all are terrific.
I just want to say thank you. And we jumped on the call because it's a lot about preventative maintenance in our in our world. We're trying to prevent unnecessary conflicts, and really this is kind of the stance that we've taken thus far, is that we're here to do a job. What is happening out there does not affect what we do in here and how we make a box, how we make a folding
Right.
curtain. And remember that we're all human beings, and we treat each other with respect. And I'm not sure what other messaging to have out there, a little bit subliminally, right? Putting
Yes.
little things in our newsletters or on our screens. I don't know. Yeah, it's just a preventative part that we're trying to just figure out how to diffuse things before it may
Right.
escalate.
Yes. And by the way, I forgot to mention, we will send you all this slideshow as a PowerPoint, as a PDF, and you're welcome to use it. If you want to show it to others, just please attribute it to the center. That's all I ask. And thank you, Kava. I appreciate your comments there. And maybe just post, I don't know if you have the platinum rule posted anywhere, maybe just post it up all over the place. It seems to people resonate with it.
Mhm.
Other thoughts, comments, questions?
And just one thing, especially with the platinum rule, it requires you to ask
Yes.
what
Yeah.
they need. And that's
Yeah.
why it's so important, because what they need is different from the golden rule of what
Right.
you need, right?
Right.
So
Right.
you may
Right.
not treat yourself as well as they want to be treated. So
Yeah.
remember,
Yeah.
it really does strike up a conversation. What do you need? And so
Love that.
that's the good thing about
Yeah.
the platinum.
I often say that if the golden rule is not a bad way to lead. Do unto others as you would have them do unto you. There's just one little hiccup. Not everybody wants to be done unto the way you want to be done unto. And that's where the platinum rule comes in. Do unto others as they would have you do unto them. And the only way you can do unto them the way they want to be done unto is, as you said, Laponda, ask. How do you want to be done unto? As simple as that. And most people will say, thank you for asking. Any other thoughts? Thank you, Laponda. All right. Well, it's been a pleasure. And I hope you'll connect with me. Connect with me on LinkedIn, please. We do a newsletter, and we have lots of resources. Check out our website. I think, Darren, did you put the links in the chat for the calendar and the website? Thank you so much. Everyone, it's been a pleasure. Hope to see you again. We'll do it again next month. Thank you, and
Thank
take
you.
care. Bye-bye.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Bye-bye. Thanks, Laponda.
Thank you. It was so great to see you.
So good to see you. You look great.
Thank you. I know we're still recording.
Oh
So
yes, let's turn that. Thank you. Thank you.
yeah.
Thank you, Captain. Thank
It's so
you.
good to see you. How's the family? How's everyone?